What's up, guys? I hope you're having a great morning, evening, night, whenever you happen to be watching this video. Now, normally I do some weird, wacky little thing before my videos start, but instead I wanted to take a moment and answer a question I get over and over again. What holster do I use for my EDC? Well, it's always Harry's holsters. I've been using his holsters for a long time. I trust my life and my family and friends' life to his holsters without question. Now, I'm flashing his website down below. He's got a new design out, and he's also working on outside the waistband. You can see a little of both right here in front of us with the Glock 43X and the Glock 48. Yes, he has those designs as well. Guys, do yourself a favor. Wander over there after the video and check out his holsters. I think you'll be very glad you did. Now, enough of that. On with the review. What's up, guys? KS here. Thanks for joining me today as always. So I debated how to present this video, mainly because we have all been inundated with videos, sometimes without the gun even present, which is okay, by the way. Many of us are excited. And of course some of us aren't. Let the haters hate. But I think the big debate with the release of the Glock 43X is whether it was actually necessary. The longer grip defeats the ultra concealability of the original 43, but I wonder, does it really? Yes, the grip is 3/4 of an inch longer, but the benefit is 4 more native rounds in the magazine. Let's face it, so many shooters shout out from the top of the mountain that more rounds is better, so if they have a single stack, they immediately add a plus whatever base plate to compensate. Glock took that need and added expense off the table unless you want more than 10 rounds. Those mods will come in time, I'm sure. But that still leaves the 43X the need to find its footing in an ever-growing marketplace full of good quality single-stack guns. I sense an if I could only have one coming, but more on that at a later time. The question for you is, does the 43X make sense for your setup? A few things need to be answered, like how does it shoot? Does the added grip aid ergonomics? And are 4 more rounds really necessary? We'll try to answer those questions and more as we explore the new for 2019 Glock 43X. I, for one, am excited. Let's dive in. Alright, I know you guys like to see comparisons, so I thought I'd jump right in with that. Of course, we've got the 43X right here. I thought I'd bring back an all-star for the channel. This is the Zafiri Precision Polymer 80 Glock 26 build. It's got the tactical pontoon trigger here and the Zafiri barrel. There is a review on this and a review on the trigger coming soon, but I thought it'd be a great comparison because a lot of people have been asking about how these two guys stack up. Keep in mind, both of these are carrying 10 rounds in them. They're both unloaded right now, of course, but otherwise they would be 10 rounds plus 1 in the pipe. And I'll tell you what, these are both ultra concealable guns. There is no doubt in my mind you can get away with either one of these. This really all comes down to, interestingly, the grip length, and the 43X is going to give you more of a grip length, and I'll talk more about that when I get into the features of the gun, of course, but that's really something to consider about this. Now, the width, of course, is going to be a little bit different. The width on that 43 is going to be 1.1 inches at its widest point, and the slide is 0.87 inches. So there is definitely a difference in width compared to the 26 here, but otherwise the length is the same. So again, it just all comes down to personal preference between the two. Now, one other comparison I wanted to make, and people of course definitely want to see this, and the 43 or the 48 rather will be back at a later time, but these guys are dimensionally exactly the same except for the slide length and barrel length. That's really the only difference. That 48 is going to be much more comparable to a Glock 19, of course, just also very thin. So otherwise these guys are the same. So once again, it comes down to personal preference on what you want to carry. If you're looking for a pretty ultra concealable gun, I know it's maybe just outside the realm of pocket or barely pocketable, but still very concealable. So there are a couple of quick comparisons. I'll be interested to hear the comments on those down below. Alright, let's walk around the frame of the Glock 43X for a moment or two. And of course, there are going to be some very big differences between this and the old 43, most notably the length of grip right here. But I want to focus on the texture for just a moment or two. One of my biggest disappointments with this, I think Glock had the opportunity to make this texture a little bit more aggressive than it has been in the past. They really carried forward the old 43 and 42 texture. I think that was a miss. They could have made this a little bit closer to the Gen 4, Gen 5 texture. I think that it would have been just fine. Most people find that that texture is great for carry. It's not a big deal. It's not overly aggressive or anything like that. Now, even though the texture is not quite as aggressive, there is still a lot of grip right here. We've got a little bit more of a hump, and you'll notice there's actually, it's not a magwell so much, but we do have a little bit of a lip here at the bottom of the grip. That helps kind of contour your fingers in, and I have found, and I've got large hands, I found that this is extremely comfortable. Now, the camera hates when I do this, but there's a little bit of a flare in that magwell. You're not going to be able to see that very well, but a tiny bit of a flare. Glock is pretty good about doing this internally to give it a little bit more of an advantage when you're inserting a new magazine, something like that. So that feature is still there. Now, speaking of magazines, a lot of people have been wondering about these magazines and the interchangeability between this and maybe the old 43. Well, unfortunately, guys, you cannot use this magazine in your old 43. If you go out and pick up one of these, you have an old 43 and you expect it to work, it's not going to. It will not insert in. It's a little bit wider than your old magazines, and that's going to parlay into the frame here in just a moment, because the rounds actually do kind of stack a little bit like this. They're not 100% straight. So again, something to consider. We've got our orange follower and we've got our Gen 5 base plate, although in the 43 it doesn't matter as much as it does in maybe like a 19X versus a 17 or something like that. But again, we've got our grip texture, and then as we move up, we've got a little bit of a beaver tail, as you would expect with Glocks, and a little bit of a cutout here as well under your finger guard. So in terms of ergonomics, although I'd like to see more grip texture, by and large, this actually does a pretty good job. It certainly stays planted because there is a lot to grab on this. It's probably my favorite feature of the gun. Now, one other thing, as I talked about the magazines, they also widened the grip a little bit as well. This is another real advantage to the 43X and even the 48, which we'll cover at a later time. Since it's longer and it's just a little bit wider, there is a lot more meat to grab onto. And that, you know, the first time I picked this up, I really felt, oh man, this is going to make a considerable difference, and it absolutely does. There's no doubt about it. And again, I'll talk about my shooting experience here in just a little while. But as we move into the controls, we've got our magazine release, which is not ambidextrous out of the box. I wouldn't expect that with this type of Glock at all, but you can flip it around. It's very easy. There's a little metal bar in there. You unhook it from the magazine release, you swap it around and put that bar back in. It's very easy to do. There's some good videos out there on YouTube to show you how to do it. And then we've got our slide lock slide release. Again, not ambidextrous, but on a form factor like this, most single stacks are not going to be fully ambidextrous. There are a few, but not very many. So that also wasn't really a surprise, and most people have gotten pretty used to it being this way. And then we've got our takedown lever on both sides, standard Glock stuff as you would expect. I'll take down the gun here in just a minute so we can see the guts. But that again is as you would expect. And then as you'll notice, once again, they did not do an accessory rail or anything. And if you guys know me at all, you know that's not a big deal for me on these smaller guns, single stacks, micro guns, that sort of thing. Some people are disappointed in that. It's not really a big deal. There are still some options, some like maybe some Viridian options, things like that, so you can still mount lasers, lights, what have you on there. But overall, that's really your grip right there. The big change, again, the length and the width of the grip, making it extremely ergonomic. So I've been very impressed with what they've done with the frame, by and large, with the exception of the aggressiveness of the grip. As we move up to the slide, here's where things get a little bit interesting. Now, you guys will probably notice I haven't been incorporating some of the pictures I usually do with my videos. This kind of wasn't very easy to try and picture. First, we're very familiar with everything going on down here, no changes. And then the slide, because of this NPVD coating, this kind of silver, matte silver finish, it was really difficult to photograph the way I like to do it. So we're going to have to just deal with the on-film presentation here. But there's a lot going on that's different. First of all, they've got the front serrations, and I think a lot of people are excited about that. Even if you don't do press checks or anything, they are definitely very usable, very tactile, along with that matte finish on there. But I love the opportunity to break up the slide. I just think that's a better look. It's more custom. And then we've got our rear serrations as well. But that finish on there, it's not quite silver and it's not quite gray. It's kind of somewhere in between, but it's very matte. You'll notice there's not a lot of glare, and I've got a lot of light going on in here. polymer, but they say that it's a very strong, very robust coating that's a lot like the Gen 5 coating, only more matte than the Gen 5, which is a welcome addition to me. I'm not a fan of the regular Gen 5 coating at all, but the rest of it is as you would expect. And then the sights, again, these are the polymer sights. These will be going almost immediately. In fact, I've got a couple of sets of sights that are sitting right next to me right now. So the next time you see this and the 48, the sights will be different. So again, there is your slide. This is the same length as your regular 43. I've seen people take pictures already of putting their regular 43 and kind of swapping things around, even with the 48 as well. Everything is interchangeable there, which is kind of nice, just not your magazine. So again, guys, there's the walk around of the gun. Let's take this thing apart. All right, let's take the 43X apart. Once again, it is unloaded. Now, you've got your takedown levers on both sides, and one thing you have to do right off the bat, you do need to pull your trigger, and once you do, what I like to do is wrap my hand around the back, and you pull the slide back about 1/8 of an inch and pull down on both tabs, both sides simultaneously, then let go, and your slide pops right off. I love it when it actually cooperates on camera. It always makes things just a little bit easier. But then everything else is as you would expect. I'll give you a little look at your captured guide rod right here. It is steel, which is nice, but there's not a lot of weight to this, to be honest with you. It's pretty hollowed out. And then your barrel, as you would expect. I do not believe that this is a marksman barrel like the Gen 5. So guys, if you know, be sure to sound off down below. I could not find anything in the literature that said that. So it would have been guesswork if I'd said it was, and I don't like to do that. So again, sound off down below if you know. And then in terms of the interior, everything else is the same as the other Glock 43s and even the 42. Obviously the 42 is a little bit smaller, but the same in principle. So I would imagine that all of your internal parts, if you've done some customization to your old 43 and you want to upgrade, you're going to be able to translate those parts to your new 43. And I've already taken this thing apart and done a real mild 25-cent polish job just to get an idea of what's going on the inside. I haven't really made any improvements to the trigger pull or anything like that. Just kind of cleaned it up a little bit. And again, it was the same type of disassembly that I would expect from any Glock. So if you like to tinker, this is definitely tinkerable, if that's a word. I'm going to run with it regardless. And there is your frame as well. Again, same parts. That trigger is going to be going away before too long. A little tactical pontoon action coming up on this. I'm very excited for that. Some fun things coming up. But again, everything else is as you would expect. And then in terms of putting it all back together, we just reverse the process, take our slide and barrel and throw those two guys together. And then we'll take our guide rod and spring assembly and make sure that it is seated properly. And then we'll throw our slide on our frame if it will cooperate. And it looks like it's going to. And now we are ready to run with the 43X. I walked onto the range very excited for the shooting experience with the 43X. If you've been following the channel for any length of time now, you know that the original 43 has not fared well against several other popular offerings. So I wanted to see if the added length and width of the grip would dramatically change my perception. You know what? It did. Now I say that with a caveat that we'll come back to in a moment. The gun otherwise was accurate. The recoil impulse was a little snappy, but I expected that in such a small form factor. There was certainly muzzle flip, but at 23 ounces loaded, it's bound to have a little flip. It was still manageable and actually pleasant. For a while. Now back to that caveat. About 6 months ago, I made some necessary and noticeable changes to my grip, throwing my support hand further out and rotating forward. This causes my shooting hand to ride higher naturally, which is fantastic for larger guns. Not so much for a gun this thin and with a very low bore and slide. I found that after a while, there was almost a burning sensation on the thumb of my shooting hand. It was caused by the rear serration scraping along my thumb knuckle, eventually cutting through and drawing blood. I'm not trying to be dramatic, guys, and frankly, it wasn't that big of a deal, but I noticed it and my accuracy suffered for it. Is the 43X functional and shootable? Yes, but now I need to go back to the drawing board and rework the grip for it. Is it worth it? Absolutely. I like to shoot all guns. All right, we're going to take a look at the trigger on the 43X. Now, one thing before we do, I was talking about the experience with the shooting on this and what the 43X and the 48 were doing. I'm actually going to slide in a picture, so if you're faint of heart, I'm totally kidding, it's not that big of a deal, but just to show you what I was talking about with what it was doing to my thumb knuckle. Again, it was an irritant more than anything else. I mean, it didn't cause any major injury or anything like that, but it was an irritant enough to where I knew that there were occasionally some shots that weren't just bad shots due to me, they were bad shots due to me and a little bit of an irritant going on. So I've got to make some modifications to the grip to be able to make this run a little bit better and more comfortably. And that's not a big deal. I mean, it's minor tweaks, that sort of thing. But in terms of the trigger, if you guys are used to a Glock trigger, then this is going to feel right at home to you. Of course, we've got our serrations on there and our safety lever, as you would expect. And then we've got our take up, and I can feel the spring working, but it's a really nice smooth take up, and we get to our wall, and there's your brake, and it's coming in a little over 6 pounds, and that's a little heavier than I prefer, but it's pretty standard Glock. I mean, that's pretty much what I expect. And then the reset is right there. Now that reset, I love Glock resets. I mean, they're audible, they're tactile. I mean, they're all really predictable, and that's something nice, especially if you train to reset. And then we get out to our start, and I'll do that again. Of course, we've got our take up to our wall, and there's your brake, and then again your reset right there, and we are at the wall, so we would have our brake again. So that is one thing about Glock triggers I like. It's heavier and a little bit more mushy than I would prefer, but at the end of the day, it's absolutely serviceable. You can make these things run, stock or not. I personally love opportunities to enhance triggers a little bit and make them a little bit more shootable for me, a little bit more fun for me. So some tactical pontoon triggers will be on the way for both the 43X and the 48. So guys, what do I think of the new Glock 43X? Well, I'm really excited about it for a variety of reasons. If you've been following the channel, you know that I've had several 43s in the past. In fact, got one basically right when they came out on the market and carried one for a long period of time. But as other options came out, I tended to find others to be a little bit more shootable for me, a little bit more fun for me. There's one in the collection you guys probably know that I absolutely love, so it's definitely going to be compared to this at some point in the near future. But I was excited for this because it's something a little bit different. They extended the grip. It was one of the things that I just didn't enjoy about the 43 as much. That grip was small and it was short, and as I get older, I don't appreciate that grip as much as I used to. It's the same thing with the 26. With the extended magazine, that +2, I love it. Without the +2, it's shootable, it's doable, I can run with it, but I don't like it as much. So this is a welcome change. Now, the grip, I wish they had done a better job with the texture. I think Glock had an opportunity to enhance it a little bit, make it better, bring it up to what I think are standards, and they didn't do that. You know, I'm sure there's a reason why, but I would have preferred that. Otherwise, I like what they did with this. I like the finish on the slide, even though some don't. I think it's really attractive. The front serrations are there. It's 10 rounds. I think 10 rounds is fantastic, and for those in 10 round states, I think this is a really good solution for you. Plus, you don't have to go out and pay more money for base plates and put them all on and all that kind of thing. You don't have to do any of that. Glock did it all for you, and it's encompassed around a stock grip, so there aren't a lot of wiggly parts you have to worry about. So that's kind of nice as well. So I'm really excited to see how this does in the market, and I know we've all been kind of crushed a little bit with videos, and I know there are a lot more on the way for sure. In fact, some from me as well. But I think it's interesting to hear the different perspectives and what people are finding and what they're considering. And I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about the 48 actually as well, and where it's going to be placed in the market, because that one's a bit of an oddball. But again, I'm excited for this, and I'm really excited to hear what you guys have to say about it. So be sure to leave some comments down below. Let me know your thoughts, whether you love it or you're a hater. I'm cool with either one. Everybody has a right to an opinion for sure. So guys, as always, thanks so much for joining me, and I will see you next time.